Water, the rain, what about the rain with the fire stuff?
Are you kidding?
Oh, me? Is it out there?
Not where I.
It wasn't so far, hasn't they made it sound like it was in the century? Maybe it's coming.
It's supposed to be later this afternoon.
One bad last night.
All right, we're outside the presence of the jury. The jury is about to come in and we'll begin the summations. If there is an objection during the summations, I will rule on the objection. If I agree with you, I will sustain the objection. If I do not agree with you, I will overrule the objection. But whatever my ruling is, there will be no approaching the bench, there will be no discussion, there will be no debating, and there will be no arguing. The ruling will be the ruling, and then we move on.
You know, we're just requesting that, because a lot of times objections are not under legal grounds. It's objecting during, co-counsel's argument, and it's just objections sustained. We don't have any idea what the grounds are, so I assume the court rules state the grounds.
Yes.
Or else it's overruled.
Yes, if there's an objection, the legal grounds will have to be stated. If it's not stated, then it will be overruled. But I'm assuming that both sides will state. All right, both sides ready for the jury? Mr. Kozlova, are you ready to begin? All right, ready for the jury?
Your Honor, are we ready for the jury?
Yeah, please. Send it.
Sorry, Your Honor, we're waiting on one juror.
You know which one?
I cannot, I think I have.
All right.
Sorry, Your Honor, they are all here.
Okay.
Who's in the restroom?
One's in the restroom?
Yes,
Okay, when that juror comes back, then,
bring them in.
yes, please. You're number one, you can make it where you want it.
Yes.
What time did you get there?
Chapter at 3. They jumped in.
At 3, but we do recessing.
No, we recessed on Tuesday at like 1. 12:30.
Oh, that's right.
I wasn't, I can't.
You got there in
Over
time.
the-
You got there.
I got there in time.
You get your speech.
He's like, talk about mine.
All right, we are back on the record. All parties, jurors, and counsel are present. We're about to start the summations. I want to remind you that what the attorneys say is not evidence. However, sometimes the attorneys might say something that you feel will be helpful for you in deliberations. Does anybody need an additional pad of paper? Everybody's okay? All right, about scheduling. I don't think we'll finish the summations today. There may be a little left, so that will be tomorrow. We'll start up again tomorrow at 9:30. After the summations are finished, then you'll be released to deliberate. You will be deliberating tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. If you do not finish tomorrow, you will have to come back on Tuesday. Monday is another holiday. It's President's Day. And the deliberation hours will be 9 to noon and 1:30 to 4:30. All right, Mr. Kozlovic, are you ready to proceed?
I am, Your Honor.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. When I stood up here in opening statements, I started by telling you that this case was really an easy case, not a complicated case, a very simple case. And as I stand up here before you now, I want to reiterate, this is not a difficult case. The question for you to answer in this case boils down to really just one question. There's only one important question in this case, one critical question that you have to answer. And that is, did Mr. Mayers, the man at the table, did he use a real gun or did he use a fake gun? Now, for those of you who have been jurors in the past, you know that as jurors, often when you sit in these cases, you have to answer a whole host of questions. You need to answer, was the defendant, was Mr. Mayers, was he even there that night? Was a gun, did he actually have a gun? Was the gun loaded? Did he actually fire the gun? You know, there could be a bunch of different questions that you have to answer. In this case, all those questions are agreed to. And it only comes down to that one question. Was it a real gun or was it a fake gun? Nothing else is in dispute. Now, I'm sure that Mr. Takapina, when he comes up here, he's going to stand up here, he's going to talk about Mr. Efron a lot. And he's going to talk to you about how did Mr. Efron earn his income, who's Mr. Efron's girlfriend, did Mr. Efron tell people he was a millionaire, or what kind of lifestyle did Mr. Efron lead people to believe he had on Instagram? None of that matters. None of that matters. None of that relates to the singular question that on November 6, 2021 in Hollywood, did the defendant have a real gun? Did he have a fake gun? Now, you're not going to hear me, and you haven't heard Mr. Lewin or I throughout this case tell you that after this crime happened, that Mr. Efron did not think to himself, I want to be compensated for what happened to me. And we are not going to tell you that Mr. Efron, after this crime, this horrible crime happened, that his primary motivation wasn't, man, I really need to go to the police and make sure that whoever did this was held accountable. That's not what Mr. Efron was thinking. Mr. Efron was absolutely focused on himself. We agree to that. We talked to you about that all the way back in jury selection. We told you at the time, Mr. Efron filed a lawsuit. Mr. Efron wants money because of what happened. okay? That hasn't been hidden from you. We actually stood here and stipulated to that with the defense, that there was a lawsuit, what the causes of actions were. We agree to all that. None of that's in dispute. It's very important that you understand your role in this case, and specifically what your role in this case is not about. You are never going to be asked to decide how much money should Mr. Efron get for what happened to him that night. Does Mr. Mayers, does he owe Mr. Efron $1, no dollars, a gazillion dollars? You'll never be asked to answer that question. Your role is not to consider that, not to consider that question. The only question that you are here to answer is, that night in Hollywood, did Mr. Mayers have a real gun or a fake gun? Was the gun that Mr. Mayers pulled out of his pants, pointed at Mr. Efron, a real gun or a fake gun? Was the gun that Mr. Mayers turned around and pointed at Mr. Efron and fired twice at that corner of Selma and Vista Del Mar, was it a real gun or a fake gun? I want to start out too with where I started in opening statements, with the video. My apologies, the audio here is not in this video. But that's what we're talking about, that moment in time, when you see the gun on that video. The answer to that question that I've now posed to you several times is obvious. It's obvious. That man decided, for whatever reason, that he was going to settle his dispute with Mr. Efron that night with a gun. That he was going to do that in the middle of Hollywood. And that he was going to fire his gun not once, but twice. That man made the decision to reach out to Mr. Efron, to provoke this confrontation. He made the decision to bring two other people with him, Ills and 12. Mr. Efron's outnumbered 3-1. But still, he made the decision to bring a loaded, concealed gun with him to that confrontation. Those were his decisions. Those decisions had consequences, and you know the results of those decisions. And that is what we are asking you to hold him accountable for in this case. We know the consequences of his decisions really beyond a doubt. The video here is clear. The defense put up 12 Mr. Phillips to narrate the video for you. And I guess the question you have to ask after listening to 12 is, are you going to listen to 12, the man who relies on the defendant for his livelihood, for his income, really for his entire career? Are you going to rely on him, or are you going to rely on your own lying eyes? Because what he described on the video did not happen. What did the video show? Well, it showed the defendant confronting Mr. Efron. It showed the defendant executing his plan to immediately get in Mr. Efron's face. Immediately engage in a physical confrontation. It shows Mr. Efron did not have a weapon. And honestly, it shows that Mr. Efron was really unprepared for what he was walking into. Mr. Efron went there to talk. He went there to argue. He went there that night to resolve his differences, not to engage in a physical fight. But he's immediately confronted with a physical confrontation. So how does he respond? Again, let's pause. Consider Mr. Phillips, 12. When he's asked simple questions, this is just a hypothetical, but if he's asked, what's the weather like that night? His answer is going to start out with something like, I couldn't tell. Mr. Efron is such a huge man. He's so muscular. When he approached me, he blotted out the sky. I couldn't tell you what it was because he's such a large individual. Okay? He repeatedly puts that fact in front of you. He wants you to focus on Mr. Efron's size, how big he is, how muscular he is. How honestly, it sounded like this was the first time that 12E had seen Mr. Efron outside of the gym. He constantly repeated how much Mr. Efron was in the gym, how big he was. At that moment, when Mr. Efron is approaching the defendant, he doesn't know what's about to happen. We all know because we see it on the video. But at that moment, he did not know. He did not know the defendant had a gun. So Mr. Efron, this huge, hulking man, he's confronted outside the parking garage, and how does he respond? He responds by doing absolutely nothing. He's approached by the defendant, and what does he do? He reaches forward with his left hand. Now this man's coming right up in his face. He reaches out to maintain the distance. 12E wants you to believe Mr. Efron's there to fight. He's there to start it. So when he reaches out with his left hand, what does that leave free? His right hand, his dominant hand. That muscular right hook. Does he throw a punch at the defendant? No. He honestly does nothing. He reaches out with his hand, and the defendant immediately gets in his face. He's actually propelled backwards. Why doesn't he punch the defendant? Why doesn't he fight him? He's there to fight him, right? That's what 12E wants you to believe. He's there to fight the defendant. Why doesn't he? Well, he told you. He knows. If I fight this man, it's all over. Not just his relationship with the defendant. He knows they're not going to recover from that. If I punch him in the face, we're done. Our friendship is over. But not just that. My livelihood, my life is over. He's thinking in that moment, we've had problems in the past. We've talked it out. We have problems now. We can talk it out. Okay? That's his mindset. He doesn't know the defendant's mindset, though. And he has no idea how bad it's gotten for the defendant. Because a relationship takes two people. And Mr. Efron, he can only give you his perspective. Apparently, though, it's gotten very bad for the defendant. Beyond repair. That is, Mr. Efron doesn't know that. He doesn't know how bad it's gotten until the next split second when that gun comes out. And you have to understand, in the instant that gun comes out, it has to be immediately clear to Mr. Efron, oh my God, it is so much worse than I thought it was. This man, my friend, a person I've known 15 years, is pulling a gun on me. This guy hates me. And this is not going to end well for me. It's all over. That's what he's confronted with in the split second that gun comes out and is pointed at him. My career's over, my livelihood, it's all done. Now, I'm going to go through multiple people's perspectives. I am not going to hold back, okay? when I talk about the defense witnesses, I want to be very clear. What they got on the stand and told you were lies. They repeatedly lied when asked about a whole variety of topics we'll get into. But there was one thing that not even they could lie or deny. And that is what was, I mean, it had to have been obvious to you before you even walked into this court on this case. The defendant, and certainly his significant other, are powerful individuals within the entertainment industry. Even their own witnesses, even Twelvey, even ASAP Lou had to acknowledge that too. And they certainly have enough power to cancel small players like Mr. Efron or Twelvey or Lou if that's what they want to do. And that right there, in that millisecond the gun is pulled out, that's what Mr. Efron is faced with. So how does he respond to that? That's a lot to take in a very short amount of time. You cannot put yourself in his shoes and say, what would I do? You cannot possibly capture all the emotion, all the history, everything that's going on in his head. And he probably doesn't respond the way that you would. You know? I mean, you probably would not walk after the person who just pulled a gun on you and unload on them verbally with your grievances. But he's angry. He's upset. He's confronted with his life changing, and he knows it's over. And even though the defendant pulled a gun on him, he's not really thinking about the gun. So he follows, and he tells the defendant how he has failed the other members of their collective. And he uses Ills and he uses Twelvey as examples along the way. So we get to the next location, the parking lot, Vista Del Mar in Selma. And when we get to that corner, the defense, certainly Twelvey, want you to believe that as they arrived there, Mr. Efron immediately started attacking Ills. I'll go through the video. Honestly, we will slow it down and I'll show you where everyone is at that moment when the defendant turns around with the gun. But you know, you've watched the video. I honestly wondered to myself if I even had to address, was Mr. Efron attacking Ills at that moment? There's daylight between them, clear space. But this is where the defense is going to double down on the idea that you cannot believe what you see with your own eyes. Because when you watch the video, you can see space between Ills, you can see space between Mr. Efron. Twelvey could not acknowledge that on the stand. That's not why he was here. He was here to say that Mr. Efron was attacking Ills. And I'm sure, as you listen to his testimony, when he first started testifying, you had to think, this sounds like something that's been practiced. This sounds like a man who's repeating pre-programmed answers to me. It came off very robotic. I don't have to tell you he was coached into certain answers because you saw it for your own eyes in court. If you didn't see it, you heard it. When Twelvey's asked a question, what is awe? That's kind of a mundane, really seemingly insignificant question. What does the defendant do? He screams out, don't answer that. Don't say. He's literally coaching him in court in front of him. And what's Twelvey's response? My brother's company? Man, I don't know. I can't say. So do you expect him to come into court and tell you the truth about exactly what happened on that street corner? That video does not show Mr. Efron attacking Ills. And that really is why when we get to the jury instructions, the instructions on defense of others are not going to apply in this case. Because what the video shows is that when they got to that street corner, the defendant thought, I've had enough. And he decided to pull his gun, and he decided to start firing at Mr. Efron. The video clearly shows, before Mr. Efron is anywhere near Hills, the defendant is already pulling the gun out, turning around, putting his arm forward. When exactly in that sequence he fired, hard to say. The sound doesn't necessarily match up perfectly with the audio. These are from two different systems. The sound is farther away than the video, but they're close enough that you can tell that in those seconds, the defendant starts firing. How does Mr. Efron react? He reacts by grabbing Hills and using him as a human shield. Would be a natural response when you're faced with someone firing a gun at you. How does the defense try to twist that though and reframe it? They try to tell you that's actually, Mr. Efron attacking Hills, because it's a tough case for them. Because it's all on video, you get to see it for yourself. This would have been a lot easier if there was no video and all they had to do was poke holes in Mr. Efron, but there's video. So they're trying to get you to believe that what you see on the video is not really what you see. Apparently, the defense also thinks that it's a problem that the defendant is actually firing shots at Mr. Efron. A problem for their defense of, apparent defense of Hills, because they say actually what he was doing was firing warning shots. Warning shots. We thought it was a prop gun. There's no such thing as a warning shot from a prop gun. So that takes me to the next, really most absurd part of the defense in this case, which is that not only was this a prop gun, but Mr. Efron knew it was a prop gun. They want you to believe Mr. Efron knew that this gun was a prop gun. But at the same time, they also want you to believe, need you to believe, that he pulled the gun in order to intimidate Mr. Efron with the gun that Mr. Efron already knows is a prop gun. It is absolutely absurd. Let's start with the first premise that they want you to believe there, that the defendant is carrying a prop gun in the first place. The testimony through Lou, what the defense wants you to believe is the defendant, he's been stabbed. Not only was he stabbed in this nightclub, 12 was stabbed at the same time. That's a violent thing to have happen to you. Not only that, but he has crazy people breaking into his house. Crazy people stalking him. Also breaking into his house. And when he's faced with that real violence, being stabbed with a real knife, having real people in his house that he doesn't know, what is his rational response to that? Let's carry a fake gun. Let's talk about Lou for a second. This ASAP Lou. ASAP Lou is a very valuable friend to have. ASAP Lou tells you that the defendant singled him out in a crowd because the defendant liked his energy. And little did the defendant know that he was basically recruiting the Swiss Army knife of best friends. Okay? ASAP Lou, not just your personal assistant, but turns into your tour manager. You need someone to be at your house while the police are searching it on a moment's notice. You got Lou. He's there. But, by the way, let's be clear, Lou, he's totally impartial. He's not financially reliant on the defendant. because Lou also has his own DJing business and his own clothing brand, which apparently have nothing to do with his good friend, the famous musician, who is also an ambassador to multiple clothing designers. Lou must have done that all on his own. On top of that, Lou, I said he's the Swiss Army knife. One of his functions, he's also the defendant's security consultant. And Lou told you that he sat down with some unnamed, unidentified security expert that did not testify, whose name he couldn't tell you, could give you no information about. And after the real security issues that the defendant was having, being cut with a real knife, he decided the best way that he could protect himself, that Rocky could protect himself, is with a fake gun. So that the next time someone approaches him with a real knife, he can pull out his fake gun. That's going to go one of two ways. That assailant might say, I didn't know you had a gun, and leave. Or they might attack you with their real knife or their real gun, and your fake gun is completely useless. You have no way of actually defending yourself. And if you're faced with real threats, clearly you want to have something that you can really defend yourself with, not some prop. That security advice, that is not just illogical, it's absurd, okay? And the reason why it's absurd and makes no sense is because it's not real advice. That advice was not given to the defendant, okay? Lou made that up for this case, for his testimony in this trial. It did not happen. But wait, because it gets even more absurd, all right? It's even more absurd because they're saying that Mr. Efron knew, he knew that that gun was fake when the defendant pulled it on him. So any even remote possible deterrent effect that that fake gun would have on anyone goes completely out the window when we're talking about Mr. Efron. Because Mr. Efron knows it's fake. I mean, with the defense logic, the defendant could have popped a balloon and it would have had the exact same deterrent effect on Mr. Efron as the fake gun. Did they prove to you? Did they prove to you at all that Mr. Efron knew that gun was fake? Mr. Efron denies it. He says, when I asked him about a prop gun, it took him back. What are you talking? Where does this prop gun come from? Okay? They told you he got that prop gun at a music video shoot in July 2021. We know the shooting happens November of 2021. Between July and November, did they show you a single instance where the defendant and Mr. Efron are together? A single instance where Mr. Efron could have received that information that this was a fake gun? Does it even make sense that if the defendant's going to carry a fake gun for his security, that he's going to tell everyone around him, hey, it's a fake gun, it's a fake gun? How does that make any sense? It makes absolutely no sense because it's not true. The truth is the defendant did not have a fake gun. He had a real gun. How do we know? Well, the first scene where the defendant pulls the real gun on Mr. Efron, what does he do? How does Mr. Efron respond? How does Ills respond? You don't see the very moment that the gun is first pulled on Mr. Efron. It's not captured on the video, they're just off camera. But what do you see when they come back into the frame? Mr. Efron's backing up. Ills is between them. Ills' entire focus is on the defendant, the man with the gun. Where's Ills looking? Is he focused on Mr. Efron, the provocateur, the one who's provoking this fight, who's trying to hurt his friend Rocky? No. He's got his back to Mr. Efron. He's focused completely on the defendant. What's Mr. Efron doing? Again, they want you to believe Mr. Efron looked at the defendant and said, "Put that fake-ass gun away." He never said that. What's he doing on the video? He's backing up. There's no video of the second that gun is pulled on him from this scene. But there is that video from the second location. So I want to play that for you, and I'm going to slow it down for you. I will play it at 2 different speeds. You've seen this video over and over and over. You could probably, if you have any artistic skill, you could probably draw it out from memory. But I want to play it slowly. You know who the people are involved in this. What's the defendant doing? He's pulling the gun out, and you see Mr. Efron dive behind Hills. That's how Mr. Efron responds when the gun is pulled on him. Now this is really the moment. So I'm going to slow it down even more. We're going to go to 1/4 speed, okay? You can see the defendant already moving back towards Mr. Efron. Mr. Efron is nowhere near Hills. He's lunging towards Mr. Efron, and Mr. Efron is diving out of the way. Now this video, it creates a host of problems for the defense in this case. This is the moment where the defendant is turning around towards Mr. Efron, where he's pulling that gun out, where he's pointing it at Mr. Efron. And the gun comes out before Mr. Efron is anywhere near Hills. That completely negates their defense. Negates the reason why he says he had to pull the gun in the first place, to protect Hills. Negates Twelby's testimony that Mr. Efron was punching Hills. Creates a lot of problems for them. You can see the space for yourself between Mr. Efron and Hills. You don't need anyone to tell you that Mr. Efron is not attacking Hills. I guess the best that they could argue is that Mr. Efron was going to attack Hills. I don't, for that to be true, there'd have to be a time machine involved. But the instructions, the jury instructions on that are clear. No, you cannot have a belief that there's going to be future harm. Doesn't matter how imminent it was. Doesn't matter if Mr. Efron was actually saying, "I'm going to beat Hills up. I'm coming after you, Hills." Doesn't work. Belief in future harm is not sufficient. I want to go back to this. You can see the moment where the defendant turns with the gun in his hand, where Mr. Efron is, and where Hills is. The second problem with this, so other than negating the defense, right, that 12E wants you to believe Mr. Efron is beating up Ills, that video further causes problems for the defense because nobody on that video is acting like that's a fake gun. They're all reacting to a real gun. Consider it from each of their perspectives. From the defendant's perspective, Mr. Mayers. If he's holding a prop gun and Mr. Efron knows it's a prop gun, that's what they're telling him, right? Why does he have to run towards Mr. Efron? Why does he have to move at all? Why does he have to lunge towards him? When Mr. Efron runs around Ills, why does he have to try to duck and dodge side by side to try to get a line of sight around Ills? If nothing comes out of the barrel, the tip of that gun, because it's a prop gun, not a real gun, there's no need to chase Mr. Efron. There's no need for him to move, period. The gun would make the sound. They're telling you that's what the deterrent is. So why does he move? He moves because it's a real gun, because things do come out of the end of that. And he's trying to get a line of sight on Mr. Efron. Consider it from Mr. Efron's perspective. They want you to believe at the first scene, Mr. Efron looked coolly at the defendant when he pulled that gun out and said, "Put that fake ass gun away." So when he pulls it out a second time, a few minutes later, does Mr. Efron look back at him and say, "Do I have to tell you again? Put that fake ass gun away again"? No, clearly that's not what he's doing. What he's doing is reacting to, oh my God, someone just pulled a real gun off. And he's jumping around Ills, trying to put something in between him and the defendant. They're very close. He believes that's a real gun. He knows. His reactions are, that's a real gun. 12E. Let's talk about 12E's perspective. He says, when he testifies, I knew that was a fake gun. That's, going back, I already knew that before the defendant pulled it out. But what does he do on the video? What does the video show? He's behind a wall. So he's the guy to come in here and tell you, we all knew it was a fake gun. When you see him, when you see his reaction, where is he? He's on the other side of the street, he's hiding. Why does he have to hide if nothing comes out of that gun? He's hiding because he knows, what we all know, it's a real gun. The third problem that video creates for the defense, it negates this whole idea of defense of others, that the defendant had to do this in order to protect Ills. The defense of others instruction will tell you that it really only applies if the defendant used no more force than was reasonably necessary in the circumstances. The defense in this case needs you to believe that Mr. Efron was not just beating up Ills, but that he was savagely pummeling Ills. 12E, before he's confronted, says Mr. Efron was throwing haymakers at Ills, mercilessly, savagely punching Ills. Why is Mr. Efron doing this? That's never explained. 12E has no explanation for that. In his opening statement, Mr. Takapina told you that Ills' face was pummeled and that they were going to bring in pictures to show you just how damaged Ills was. Well, obviously that did not pan out. And obviously 12E was not expecting to be confronted with pictures or videos of Ills' face the day after this happened, showing not a single scratch on his face. Nothing. If what 12E was describing to you had actually happened, these savage blows landed on Ills' face, if that had actually happened, they would have brought in photos of Ilse's bloody, bruised face, black eyes, busted lip, whatever it was, cut on his cheek. They didn't bring in any of that because it didn't happen. One step further, we actually brought in pictures of him to show there's nothing there. It absolutely did not happen. Okay. Before I go on, I want to address another thing that I'm sure Mr. Takapina is going to talk about when he stands up here, and that is the injury to Mr. Efron. And some of you may have the attitude as you sit here, you know what? He wasn't really hurt that bad. Mr. Takapina will, I can almost guarantee he's going to call it a finger scrape. And then you have on top of that, you have Lou blurting out that, the defendant's going to go to prison for this long period of time. There's a reason why the judge sustained that, told you not to consider that. But it's interesting that Lou blurts that out when he's not asked a question about that. That's evidence, clear evidence of Lou just trying to get out information to you that he thinks is prejudicial to the people, to our case. I hope you understand that even though this one incident did not result in a serious injury, this is still a serious crime. That the potential for real serious harm was absolutely there that night. This was 10 o'clock p.m. on a Saturday night, a busy Saturday in a busy area of Hollywood. And your common sense tells you how bullets travel when they're fired. They don't always hit their intended target. And the potential for someone else to have been seriously hurt, in this case, is absolutely present. You had busy nightclubs, people getting out of nightclubs, cars, the whole parking lot full of cars. The potential that someone else could have been hit was there, it was real, and it's serious. And you know that when guns are discharged in busy areas, people die. We are lucky that's not this case. But it's still an important case. And I'm going to continue to point out how absurd some of the defense arguments are. And I will fully acknowledge to you that my tone can be sarcastic. Please don't take my sarcasm as any indication that this is unserious. There are definitely laws that you can argue with and say, I don't really know if this should be on the books. This is not one of them. Firing a gun off in Hollywood on a busy Saturday night is not one of them. And even if that's your perspective, you need to set that aside. That's not your role as a juror. The judge tells you what the law is. Your job is just to apply the facts to the law and make a decision. The only decision you have to make is, was it a real gun or a fake gun? Now, to that end, talking about Mr. Efron's injuries, you'll be able to read the jury instructions for yourself, but there's a whole host of things that we do not have to prove in this case. The law tells you we do not have to prove. That the defendant even touched Mr. Efron. Mr. Efron doesn't have to be injured in any way. The defendant does not even have to fire his gun for this crime to be completed. He doesn't even have to point it directly at Mr. Efron. The moment the defendant pulled that gun out, armed himself, and was capable of inflicting injury on Mr. Efron, that crime was completed at that moment. Again, you'll see in the instruction, I put the number of the instruction at the bottom for you so you can go back and read it yourself. The gun does not have to be pointed directly at Mr. Efron. There can be steps that the defendant still has to take before he inflicts injury. It does not even need to be fired. The evidence in this case compels you to one conclusion to that question I've posed to you multiple times. Was it a real gun or a fake gun? And that is really that the defendant was in possession of a real gun. Mr. Efron recovered real ammunition from the scene, from a real gun that fired. Everyone in the surveillance videos that I've played for you now, that I've slowed down for you, is responding like it's a real gun. When the defendant's house is searched by LAPD, they only find real guns and real ammunition. The defense theory in this case that this was a prop gun, there is absolutely no evidence to support that idea. The only thing that supports that is Twelby and Lou, who are telling you that it's a prop gun. Once you decide that it's a real gun, you're deciding that those two witnesses especially lie. Everything that they say should be rejected. And why do they lie to you? Because they know the truth. They know this was a real gun. So you can decide this case by finding they lied to you. You can decide this case by just watching the videos for yourself. You can decide this case by listening to Mr. Efron's testimony. Every time he's talked about this crime, he has always maintained this was a real gun. And if you determine that the gun used in this case was a real gun, the law compels you to one conclusion: that the defendant is guilty. That's it. Not because you want to find him guilty, not because you're going to find pleasure in finding him guilty, but because the law compels you that once you make that determination, that's the only just outcome in this case. I know Mr. Takapina is going to talk about Mr. Efron, and he's going to talk about all of Mr. Efron's statements. He's going to point out every single minor inconsistency that Mr. Efron has ever made when he is given statements. He's going to bring up points in time that Mr. Efron is talking about things that have absolutely nothing to do with this case. You saw that clearly when the defense put up Wally Sajemi and tried to play snippets of Mr. Sajemi's recordings of Mr. Efron. They tried to put up clips where Mr. Efron said to Mr. Sajemi, "I'm already a millionaire." Oh, look, see, he said he was already a millionaire, but he's not. Where he said to Mr. Sajemi, "Go ahead and post news articles on social media." He said I'm suing Rocky. I don't care about the police. I don't care what happens to the criminal case. I'm getting 30 M's. If I disappear, this case will be harder for the prosecutors. All those clips, none of those clips helped you answer the question in this case: was it a real gun or a fake gun? And who cares? Who cares if Mr. Efron said in the past he was a millionaire when he wasn't? Who cares if he asked someone to post a news article on social media? Mr. Efron wants to be paid because he was the victim of a real crime by a real gun. And some of the most important evidence that you heard in this case actually came from those recordings. Those recordings are very important because Mr. Efron does not know he's being recorded. He thinks he's talking to his friend. He has no idea that this person is betraying him, recording him, and then immediately turning their conversations over to the defendant. These are his unfiltered, unprepared thoughts. He's not talking to the police. He does not even know he's being recorded. But But what he says to Wally in those recordings is exactly what he told you here in court. I want to go through them because these recordings are important. So I'm going to break them down. We're going to play a couple of them.
Besides, I'm mad at both y'all niggas for letting that shit happen, you feel me?
Oh, it ain't no picking sides. That nigga 100% crazy and wrong.
Yeah.
100% wrong. And he got 12-year ills mixed around. I'm not. You gotta understand, Raggy been on his high horse for a very long time. You feel me? He didn't have to do what he did. I don't have, he forced my hand. You feel me? I got over 20 missed calls between him ills. Why is Rocky going out his way to do anything like that? You get what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure you didn't get a story or whatever it is, but you gotta look at it like this. Why is he going out his way to call me 20 times? Like, it was a 12-year with him. Text messages saying link up, where you at? And all of this is because of I pressed him about Josh, him not doing right by Josh, and he spoke to Josh mom and lied. You get what I'm saying? So I wrote him about that. He hits up Bari later about that, but I'm with Bari. Bari got the phone on speaker. You get what I'm saying? This shit didn't fit well with me. So Rocky talks about me within that conversation because he sees I text him about Josh. You feel me? And told him to take ASAP out my name. This is 7 months ago. I took ASAP out my name. You feel me?
Yeah.
He's a bitch, so he goes ahead and hit Bari because Bari influenced him a whole week later doing that complex con shit. You feel what I'm saying? Just so happened I'm with Bari while Rocky hits him. Rocky says my name. You get what I'm saying? Real Money 12-year ills is at his house. I hit Real Money the next morning, tell Real Money. I heard Rocky bitch ass tell him I don't fuck with him. Woo-dee-woo. You feel me? No fighting words, none of that. Just basically, nigga, I heard you. But in Rocky's head, he was like a bitch because Bari had him on speaker. Rocky don't know who else heard that conversation, but he know I heard him talk about me. And I told Rocky over the years, nigga, if you have a problem with me, let me know. Stop rocking me sweet. You feel me?
Yeah.
Boom. Next thing you know, I guess that was enough for him. He felt like a bitch because he knew I heard that conversation. I wasn't supposed to hear that conversation because Rocky I never heard him say curse words or even have that type of energy towards me. You know what I'm saying? So now I know the real him. I tell Real Money, tell that nigga fuck him. You feel me? Boom. Shit is related to him. Next thing you know, I get over 20, 30 missed calls between him, Ills, and Rocky. Text messages. I'm staying at the Lowe's. I tell him, he calls me. I finally answer because I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
I answered him. He's like, where you at? With his flip voice. I'm like, huh? Where you at? Nigga, I'm at the W. I'm not really at the Lowe's. You feel me? You know, Hollywood Boulevard. They all look the same. He's like, no, you not, nigga. That's a bum-ass hotel. I'm like, huh? He said, show me outside. Okay. All of it look the same. I showed him outside. What he does, be there in 5 minutes. I'm like, all right. My girl like, what the fuck is going on? I'm like, I don't know. He calls me. He calls me. I got all these text messages, bro. These niggas isn't dumb. You and a couple other people heard this story. Rocky out here thinking it's all sweet, but his life is really, and bro,
That's what I wanted to ask you, bro. Like, why the boys though? You feel me? Why take it to you know the guys? You feel me?
who me?
Yeah, think though how the boys meet.
Why wouldn't I, bro? He's a multi-millionaire. He blamed at me. I'm no longer on his level. Everybody turned on me. Everybody,
bro.
Rocky had everybody turned on me that day. What the fuck am I doing? Spin on his block and go shoot him up?
In that couple minutes, he tells the exact same details that he told you when he testified in this case. That's evidence they created. That's their person trying to trick Mr. Efron, trying to get Mr. Efron to say something damaging, say something that's going to undermine his case. Because while he knows he's recording these conversations for one purpose, so that he can turn them right over to the defendant. But what is Terrell saying? Everything consistent with what he told you. How this interaction started. Even that he blamed at him, that he shot at him.
the same thing, because he waved at me 4 or 5 times. I had to use ills as a shield. I'd be mad.
I feel niggas ain't trying to like, you feel me? Not trying to end squash this shit, get some paper or something, or what, you know, like.
Bro, it's too late. He told me suck a dick. Boom, boom, boom. I hit up John the same day. Bro, that's all on him. He had nothing but time. Bro, when I got the best lawyer in LA and went about my business. You feel me? He told John to stop contacting me. I sent him the pictures of the bullets, sent him the text messages of him, letting him know how serious this is. You know what he said? Nigga, fuck you. So what I'm supposed to do? Accept the nigga shooting at me 4 or 5 times where I almost died, or sue this man. Now coming with suing, of course, the severity of the case, he's trying to kill me. So that's what he gotta read. You feel me?
There ain't no way niggas could squat, like, you feel me? No paper, no nothing, bro. Like, you feel me? Like,
bro, he's he's 33 years old. He got other men talking for him. He know what he did. You get what I'm saying? He had more than enough time. This shit happened 7 months later. He wasn't trying to reach out to me. He still didn't reach out to me.
with legal shit, you know, so.
That's on him. I didn't want to go like that. I went ahead and got a lawyer. When you get a lawyer, that has nothing to do with voice. And Jabari, his friend, he might as well thank him for him not being late in the feud. But those allegations, you feel me? He got enough, and you're part of the PR team. He would have had enough people to block that if Jabari didn't say nothing, bro. Those was allegations. Jabari made it official.
Again, he's entirely consistent. The defendant shot at me 4 or 5 times. The same thing he walks into the police station and tells the police. He's entirely consistent about what happens after the shooting. That he reached out to the defendant, that he sent him text messages, pictures of the fired cartridge cases, that he reached out to the defendant's manager. All that consistent with what you saw in the text messages and everything else that came in. Even how he was outed as the victim in this case, that Jabari made it official. That Jabari was the one who said that he had snitched and attached his name to it. That's their evidence that they created. And it's entirely consistent with what he told you when he testified.
I just want y'all niggas to kind of end this shit and, you know, bygones.
And, you know, he could have ended it when he shot at him. Who ends anything when a nigga shoot at you 4 or 5 times and you gotta grab another member to protect yourself? He called me out my living space. Called me, told me to stop ducking him. He claimed that that's called premeditated, bro. You feel what I'm saying? He didn't give me a chance. He told me I'm gonna come to a gun battle. I came to link him to see what the fuck the status was about. He pulls out. He tries to chest bump me. He tries to chest bump me and then pull out a gun for self-defense. He's a pussy boy. And me and Ills is standing in between while he's trying to shoot me. He didn't give me no seconds, bro. This shit happened like that. And I got it all on camera. You don't want that, like, trust me. He's stupid. He did it all on camera, champ.
Again, consistent. I didn't know I was walking into a gun battle. I didn't bring a weapon. What does he do to me, though? He tries to chest bump me, and then he shoots at me.
So it's really to get in the road, or you just trying to move on and shit?
Besides suing somebody like that. You feel me? Now, he got to face the consequences of with that because he wanted to be a gangster and run out his crib like that. That has nothing to do with me. You feel me? I did my part. If you look at it on my end, what else am I supposed to do?
Why not just ask for the bag or, you know?
I tried already, bro, and you don't ask for the bag because that's extortion, bro. When you got somebody that's shooting at you, you ever look like, I'm smart, bro. You gotta understand I'm not no dumb black nigga, bro. You know what I'm saying? You ask for a bag without a lawyer, bro, it's called extortion. You feel me? You're gonna do everything accordingly. Everything accordingly, or it's gonna catch up with you.
What's Mr. Sajemi trying to do? He's trying to bait Mr. Efron into giving some kind of inconsistent answer, but Mr. Efron's consistent the whole time.
The lawyers, when I went to the lawyers filed, gave the police the evidence, but you can't sue somebody with circumstances like that without criminal actions because it's such a heinous crime. When you purposely know what you're doing, that's a whole different ballgame. You get what I'm saying? And I'm still feel sympathetic for this man because I know that. I know what he's about to endure. But he told me, fuck off, go to the police. He told me this type of shit.
You're hearing his unvarnished, his unprepared thoughts. He's telling you, even as this happens, he still feels bad for the defendant. Still knows he's about to go through stuff, but the defendant gave him no other option. Told him to go to the police.
I'm not the toughest nigga in the world. I don't know too many gangster niggas that's gonna come at Rocky. He's a millionaire, bro. That shit can come from anywhere. He decided to fire on me.
And that's why, right? Because it was the defendant's decision.
Like, who gets cool after somebody firing on you 5 times, bro? Nobody.
Bro, I could probably talk to him and shit and figure out, you know, like some.
I don't even want no message relay like that because he had more than, bro. I had over years of Chelsea, bro. I'm not the hardest person to reach. You get what I'm saying? He chose to do that. Like, and you seen what I just sent you the other day, how he reacted off of me hitting up John to try to figure out what we're gonna do here before I even hit up a lawyer or anything. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, he don't want to hear nothing from nobody, bro, until like, some people is like that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And then I don't want to jeopardize what you have going on, him thinking that you spoke to me. Like, don't even put yourself involved in this shit, bro. Trust. Rocky will start looking at you funny, and I don't need you feeling like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It just trickled down to everyone, you feel me? Like, even if you don't, you feel me? Like,
That's gonna fuck up everybody's career who work for him.
You feel me? So,
Everybody who worked for him, but he did that because he's stingy, bro. I can't not do what I'm doing and think about everybody else. You know what I'm saying? Because I gotta worry about myself and worry about what the fuck happened to me. He wasn't thinking about nobody. Everybody's thinking like that, but then when it comes out, niggas are gonna really start hating him because, bro, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself out there to do something like that where it's unforgivable, bro? You get what I'm saying? Like, this ain't something like it was a fight, you punch me, I can sue you, you don't go to jail, bro, you fired on me.
Those recordings are important because the defense created them. Because Mr. Sajemi knew he was going to send those immediately to the defendant. And he recorded 2 separate phone calls on 2 separate dates. Said he sent them to the defendant. But Mr. Sajemi, although he tried to catch Mr. Efron saying something inconsistent, catch him in a lie, didn't work. When it comes to asking Wally, well, hey, what did you say? What did the defendant say to you about this? All of a sudden, he can't remember. Didn't record those calls. He's the mediator, right? But he doesn't remember a single thing the defendant said to him about this. Definitely doesn't remember the defendant saying to him, what are you talking about? This was a fake gun. He hears over and over and over from Mr. Efron that the defendant fired a real gun at him 4 or 5 times. So he's trying to catch Mr. Efron in a lie, but what does he catch him saying? I'm with Jabari and Rocky talks bad about me. I tell Rocky I don't want to have anything to do with him. He calls me while I'm sleeping in my hotel room. He provoked a meeting with me. He and Ills called me 20 times. He told me he's going to come meet me at the W, and he fired at me 4 or 5 times. I had to use Ills as a human shield, or I'll be dead. He's unequivocal. This was a real gun. He tried to kill me. And after that, everybody turned on me. It's too late for Rocky to pay me and make this go away. I tried to resolve this quickly. I tried to reach out to Rocky. I tried to reach out to John, his manager. He left me no options. He told me to go to the police. So I got a lawyer, and that's what I did. maybe we still could have kept this quiet, but then Jabari posts that post about me and outs me to the world as a snitch. Those recordings, I want to say they're about 25 minutes. You listen to the whole thing, those are just snippets. Tried to give you a reasonable sample from them. But you listen to the whole thing, what will you not hear Mr. Efron say? I'm faking the whole thing. Rocky really fired a fake gun at you. You know, right? We all know Rocky carries that fake gun. That's pretty new. I was never in any real danger. None of that comes out of Mr. Efron. He's unequivocal. He tried to kill me. That's the entire case. Mr. Efron told the police what happened. He was consistent about the details of the shooting. Since the very beginning of this case, he's been consistent. He was consistent when he knew he was being recorded. He certainly knew the police were going to write reports. He probably had some idea that the police were video or audio recording him. More importantly, he was consistent even when he didn't know he was being recorded. When he thought he was in a safe space, when he thought he was talking to his friend, he's still consistent. He has told the details of what happened that night no less than 9 times. Okay? And he was on the witness stand for 5 days when he testified. He has had to repeat this over and over and over. Can you imagine telling the details of something that happened to you 9 times and not having minor inconsistencies in what you said? I mean, it's completely natural. But he, Mr. Efron, was locked into his statement on November 8th, 2021. You could even argue that he was locked in on November 6th, the day of the shooting, because he started sending text messages to the defendant, to 12, to Ills, to John. He's locked in with all of them, telling them this was a real gun, sending them pictures of the cartridge cases. Focusing though on that important question of was this a real gun or a prop gun, when is the first time that's raised, that this is a prop gun? You heard in the testimony from ASAP 12 and ASAP Lou that the first time this comes up, I guess, is August of 2024, and they are only going to tell the defense attorney. So they held that all-important information for over 2 years, almost 3 years, before then they're going to tell the details to the defense attorneys only. You found out that it was only turned over to us the day before jury selection started in this case. And then you found out that Lou's statement was actually changed about, oh, where the gun is now. That was changed the day that he came in to testify. That timing alone defies credibility.
Objection or the mistakes of the evidence.
That the idea that they would not be running into the police station to tell their story is absurd. So let's focus on their stories. ASAP Lou, I've already talked to you about how he's conflicted in this case, how he relies on the defendant for his financial, livelihood. You should view his testimony as being very convenient. His story changes, and he has a perfect explanation for everything. He came in, he told you a story to explain away the evidence that would obviously point to the defendant's guilt. The primary piece of evidence that he needs to explain away, that Lou needs to explain to you so that you no longer see the defendant is guilty, was why was the defendant carrying a fake gun? Lou's going to answer that for you. And why did the defendant have a magazine for a Glock 43, which just so happens to be the same type of gun that's consistent with the gun that fired those 2 cartridge cases that Mr. Efron located, why does he just so happen to have that same magazine in his bedroom closet, defendant's bedroom closet? So how does he answer the question of why the defendant was carrying the fake gun? Again, we went through the whole thing of extreme violence the defendant's facing, and their only reasonable response to that is to carry a fake gun. We've already talked about how that defies any logic. Keep in mind, though, that apparently, even though that was Lou's advice, the defendant doesn't follow that advice completely, because he literally sleeps next to a 44 Magnum Desert Eagle, a real gun, which is in reach of his bed. Not much further away, he has a rifle and a shotgun. What he did not have anywhere in his house was a prop gun or any prop ammunition. Obviously, if you were the victim of a violent crime, the response to arm yourself with a real gun is preferable to this whole prop gun thing. Clearly, that's something the defendant also agrees with. Lou was very clear that the fake gun that he alleges that the defendant had, which he said he personally modified, was modeled after a semi-automatic pistol. That's Lou's testimony. And here's where it becomes painfully obvious that Lou did not fully think this through. He didn't fully flush out the story before he came in to tell you. He had to tell you that he modified the gun by adding that belt clip and by putting that magazine extender on, so that he could explain why that gun had those small things that 12E could just so conveniently come in here and tell you that in the heat of the moment, when it's quickly pulled, he saw those 2 same features, that tiny piece of metal on the side that would hold it to your belt, and the magazine extender, so that their stories match, their stories line up. If you accept that the defendant had a fake gun that Lou just described, you would also have to explain why there are no fired fake prop cartridges at the crime scene. Because the gun that Lou described, this prop gun that existed, that's a semi-automatic prop gun, would operate just like a real semi-automatic pistol. And it would shoot those cartridge cases out the side just like a real gun would. So why are there no prop cartridge cases found at the scene? In his opening statement, Mr. Takakina made a big show of pointing out how 7 or 8 LAPD patrol officers scoured every inch of that street of Vista Del Mar. They walked up and down with searchlights, and they didn't find anything. They definitely did not find any prop-fired ammunition. Now, he obviously did that to argue to you that Mr. Efron planted those cartridge cases. That he actually discovered them at the scene after the police had searched it. So there's no cartridge cases, he comes back and he plants them. But he forgot that if the police are as thorough as he's saying, that they also would have found the ammunition from the defendant's gun. That painfully contradicts their own defense in this case. Do you want to, I got your notes, do you want to take a break now?
It's up to you. Is this a convenient spot?
I'm going to move into
All right, let's take a break now. Folks, please be outside the courtroom doors at 10 minutes after 11. At this time, we will resume. Please don't discuss the case. jurors have returned, and I understand that the missing phone was not missing at all. You're good. All right, we're back on the record. Our jurors are present, all parties in council are present, and Mr. Bowman,
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna just pick up briefly where I left off. We were talking about the police search at the scene when they initially respond to these calls. And I point out these calls because you heard from Sergeant Zizzo, who did his best to describe for you their response to what was, not necessarily a clear situation. They received multiple calls and they talked to multiple people on the scene that pointed them in 3 different directions. Did this happen at Selma and Argyle? Did this happen at Selma and El Centro? Did this happen at Vista Del Mar and Selma? Was it in the street? Was it in the parking lot? What exactly happened? They show up, they do their best. That was the testimony from him, that with this conflicting information, they did the best that they could, but they went to these multiple locations, sometimes receiving conflicting information. What Mr. Tacopina did when he stood up on cross-examination was play videos from another officer to show, look, there's 7, 8 officers on the scene. They're doing this thorough search of the street. He tells you an opening statement, it's a thorough search, spotlights involved. But what he's not told you is why the police then don't find the fired cartridge cases from the defendant's gun, this prop gun, that's gonna fire prop ammunition, why they don't find those cartridge cases either, because they're saying that's also a semi-automatic firearm. So 2 cartridge cases also would have come out of that. Mr. Tacopina also made a similar error to you when he stood up in opening statement and he described how you were going to see Mr. Efron returning to the scene. He put up part of that grainy surveillance video of a person with a white top coming back to the scene at 11:10 and made a big point of telling you that's going to prove that Mr. Efron's a liar because Mr. Efron said he came back with his girlfriend, and these were his words, unless she's a ghost, she's not on that video. But you know now, because you've sat through the evidence and the testimony, that all the evidence points to that not being Mr. Efron. Mr. Efron, when he came back, took photographs of the cartridge cases. When LAPD went to collect this video, in the day after they were notified of this, they were told by Mr. Efron an approximation of when he turned. He didn't have an exact time. He gave them an approximation. They went, they collected the video, they saw someone returning, and they thought, okay, that must be him, and they collected it. That error that they made back in November of 2021 has certainly been flushed out in the years since this has happened. And what you know from the timestamp on Mr. Efron's photographs of those cartridge cases is that he actually came back closer to 11:45. The video stops at 11:20, so obviously we don't have video of him actually coming back. It certainly does not contradict Mr. Efron's detailed statement to you that when he came back, he had his girlfriend with him. She wouldn't obviously be on video. It's not collected and not played. It's also clear the person who comes back is wearing different clothing than what Mr. Efron was wearing at the time. And you also heard Mr. Efron testify at the preliminary hearing. When he was first shown that video, he looked at it and said, that's not me. So all that together, you know the person that you see on that video was not Mr. Efron. Mr. Tacopina, I'm sure, made a big point pointing out why Mr. Efron returning to that scene, not having his girlfriend with him, and proving that Mr. Efron was lying with those details, was all to get you to believe his next big point, which is that Mr. Efron planted those 2 fired cartridge cases that he found at the scene. That's what the defense needs you to believe in this case. But the idea that Mr. Efron planted those cartridge cases, when you really think through all the information that you have does not make sense. One reason, consider that Mr. Efron, as he's telling people what happened to him over and over and over, I mean, I could go 9 times over, he's telling everyone that the defendant shot at him 3 or 4 times, including the night he brings those 2 cartridges into the police station. He tells that police officer 3 or 4 shots. This is important because if you assume that what the defense is trying to argue to you, that Mr. Efron planted those cartridge cases, you have to ask yourself, how, within reason, how would that happen? What you'll find is that none of the things that you would reasonably expect to happen actually happened in this case. If he planted those cartridge cases, what would you expect? First, where did those cartridge cases come from? How did he actually, mechanically, how did he have 2 fired cartridge cases to plant? The defense wants you to believe that apparently he knew in advance that Mr. Mayers, the defendant, was going to shoot at him. And that he was going to shoot at him with a semi-automatic pistol. So Mr. Efron, the mastermind that you saw testify here, hatched this elaborate plan, and weeks before this crime, he went to a gun range, and he got a 9mm Glock 43 and fired it multiple times. By some miracle of a coincidence, Mr. Efron must have known that ASAP Lou accidentally bought a magazine for a Glock 43. Okay? And that ASAP Lou, somehow Mr. Efron learned that. He's also going to intuit or know ASAP Lou's going to load that magazine, fully loaded, and he's going to leave it at the defendant's bedroom closet. Now, if you're already thinking this sounds completely unreasonable, I'm with you. It makes absolutely no sense. At this point, just to go back to jury selection and the example that you were given with Boomer the dog, and Mr. Lewin asked you, well, how can you be sure that a tornado didn't come down the chimney and just trash the house? How can you be sure? I mean, honestly, that sounds more reasonable than the idea that Mr. Efron knew in advance that he was going to be fired at and knew to go get that specific kind of gun to fire at a firing range to collect those cartridge cases that he could plant in the future when this shooting happens. There's no way that this scenario would work without Mr. Efron knowing in advance that this shooting is going to happen and that he's going to need cartridge cases to plant at the scene. Under the defense scenario, too, he would not have time to get those cartridge cases any other way. He has a limited amount of time, at 10 p.m., just after 10 p.m. on a Saturday, to leave the scene where the shooting happens, go find a gun, fire it off 2 times. The gun he's going to find also is going to be a Glock 43, so not any gun, but that specific gun. And he's going to fire it off multiple times, and then he's going to go back to the scene. I guess, by 11:10, when that person in the white shirt, so he changed his clothes, he's going to go back and he's going to plant those cartridge cases at the scene. You would not have enough time to possibly do that. So second point to consider, how it doesn't make any sense that Mr. Efron planted these, is that, as I pointed out, Mr. Efron told literally everyone who would listen, including Wally on those tapes, that the defendant fired more than 2 shots. Now, you all, I'm sure, can appreciate how stressful this situation would have been for Mr. Efron, and that as the defendant's firing at him, he's not sitting there counting exactly how many shots. So as he's telling the police how many shots were fired at him, he's doing his best to recall a stressful situation, and he genuinely believes 3 or 4 shots are fired at him. That's his sincere belief. That's what he tells the police. If he is going to plant those cartridge cases, though, and come up with the crazy scenario that I told you, he intuits the shooting's going to happen, gets these cartridge cases in advance so he can come back and plant them at the scene, wouldn't you reasonably expect Mr. Efron to tell the police the defendant only fired at him 2 times? Wouldn't that be your reasonable explanation? If he's making this up, he planted these cartridges, he's making up how many shots were fired at him, wouldn't you expect him to walk into the police and say, no, it was only 2 shots? He would match his story with the physical evidence that he's walking into the station with. Now, to this point, here's another way that Mr. Efron would have had to abuse his, telepathic powers, because he's going to know, or he would have to know, that after he tells the police, I only got 2, but there were 3 to 4 shots that were fired, he's going to know the police are going to later go collect a video that has audio, and that audio is going to definitively show you that, in fact, there were only 2 shots that were fired. I want you to consider, when you're considering how reasonable this scenario is that Mr. Efron planted these cartridge cases, consider the alternative, which is, what if Mr. Efron had walked into the police station and he said, the defendant fired 4 shots at me, and he walked in and he was holding a bag with 4 fired cartridge cases in it. And then the police went out and collected video, and you found out there were only 2 shots. Then you have a major, major problem. It could not be true what Mr. Efron would be saying. But that's not the evidence you have. You have the inverse. You have him saying, I genuinely believed it was 3 to 4, but I only found 2. And then you have independent evidence, independent of him, that shows you it was actually only 2. Third problem with Mr. Efron planting these cartridge cases. If what the defense was telling you was true, that Mr. Mayers fired a fake semi-automatic gun, and Mr. Efron planted these 2 real fired cartridge cases at the scene, wouldn't you expect other evidence to contradict his story? I mean, Mr. Efron specifically sends text messages that night to the defendant's manager, Ills, and 12E, all of which, in sum and substance, accuse the defendant of firing a real gun at him. Wouldn't you expect even one of those people to respond back to him and say, what are you talking about? We all know Rocky carries a fake gun. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. That's their moment to contradict him, to confront him, and they don't. While we're on the subject of his text messages, and him really kind of locking himself into this being a real gun that's fired at him, those text messages are important because they also betray 2 other major flaws in the defense theory of this case. Those messages by Mr. Efron put the defendant, certainly the defendant himself, but all the other people in his inner circle on notice that Mr. Efron is going to accuse the defendant of shooting a real gun at him. So I've already told you, wouldn't you expect them to respond back with, hey, you know that that's not true, this was a fake gun. That's not what happens with, the text messages you saw from the defendant were to deny anything happened. But second, the defendant would immediately understand that that prop gun that he used, right, that real prop gun that he has, that is not only his get out of jail free card, that is his make Mr. Efron's fake lawsuit go away later. So he needs to keep close tabs on that fake gun, right? So your reasonable expectation was, Mr. Efron texts the defendant, you tried to kill me with your real gun. The defendant's response would be, I gotta keep that gun. Now, what is the actual response you receive through Lou? ASAP Lou comes in here and tells you that the defendant came up to him with the prop gun and said, get rid of this, I don't want it anymore. Is that reasonable? This is kind of where my job gets hard, because I have to explain to you how their version of how this prop gun disappeared doesn't make sense. But we know that none of this actually ever happened, because this is all a made-up story. So when I talk about the prop gun, understand that there never was a prop gun, okay? Never to begin with. I'm sure what happened was Lou took that Glock 43, the real one that was used, with the modified slide, and got rid of it. And when he did that, he forgot that there was an extra magazine for that gun in the defendant's closet. Now to that point, and oh my gosh, this is a new magazine. I'm not saying that that magazine that we have in evidence, that magazine specifically was the one in the gun that was used at the time the shooting happened. Guns come with multiple magazines. You can purchase additional magazines for guns. But the defendant knew he had to get rid of that real gun. He can't have that, because that's going to definitively tie him back to this crime scene. So either he or Lou, his right-hand man, get rid of it. And they get rid of it with the magazine that's in it. But they forget there's that backup magazine in the defendant's closet. But either way, let's assume their prop gun theory is true. Why would the defendant get rid of the one thing, the most important thing that could definitively prove his innocence? Why would he do that? You received an instruction about someone, either the defendant or someone other than the defendant, trying to conceal or destroy evidence, and using that as actual evidence that the defendant was aware that he was guilty. Why would the defendant get rid of that gun unless he knew it was going to prove he was guilty? Unless he knew it was a real gun. It literally makes no sense that he would not keep the prop gun so that when Mr. Efron goes to the police, he can turn around and say, here it is, here's the prop gun. This is the one I used. Anyway, if you're inclined to accept Lou's story that he flew across the country on a private jet and gave the prop gun back to the co-director of the DMV music video shoot, there's still yet another problem with Lou's story. Why doesn't Lou get the gun back? So they haven't explained why would the defendant get rid of this gun in the first place. He needs to keep this. This is very important in this situation. But for whatever reason, he gets rid of it. Lou flies it back and they give it to this co-director. Lou knows this is a crucial piece of evidence. This would prove that his brother is innocent. So what does Lou tell you? What efforts did Lou make to get that gun back? Because he needs it back now. Oh my God, I can't believe we got rid of it in the first place, but now we definitely need it back. But what does he do? He makes one phone call, and he's basically told, I don't really know where it is. And so he decides, just let it go. make any other inquiries, doesn't do anything else to try to get that gun back. Does that sound believable for even 1 minute? It's certainly not reasonable. We're bordering on insulting to your intelligence. Also consider the timing of when Lou comes up with this idea that he gave the prop gun back to the co-director of the music video. That was literally something he came up with the day that he testified. Why does that matter? Well, we don't have an opportunity to go find this co-director, bring that person into court, call them as a witness. But Lou's known about him for years. They could have called him. They could have had him come in and testify and tell you all about it. Certainly, they would have known about it when Lou tells his story in August of 2024. So where is he? Where is this co-director? Where is his testimony? You didn't hear from him because his whole story is made up. On top of that, has the defense proved to you that this prop gun ever existed? Ever existed? I mean, you would want to hear from the co-director that has it now, right? But wouldn't you also want even a single piece of paper that proves to you that that gun ever existed? A receipt for it? This was on a music video. Where are the call sheets about it? Is there a safety coordinator that could say, yeah, I was there, we had prop guns, and I had to warn people about them? Was there a video of the gun, even at the music video shoot? Is there literally a picture or anything? We found a picture of Ilse's face from the day after this incident. This they're saying is a prop gun that not only was it in the music video, but it was so widely known that the defendant carried it. Where are pictures of him with it other times? There's literally been no documentation provided to you that that gun ever exists. No purchases, no receipts, no paperwork, anywhere. Lou says he took that prop gun, right? And what did he do? He modified it. He put a belt clip on it. He modified the magazine. Did he bring in any proof of that? Receipt for a belt clip? Receipt for a magazine extender? Nothing. On top of that, this is an item that the defendant carried around all the time, right? He had to. This was his security. When the police search his house, do they find literally anything that supports the idea that a prop gun was there? Do they find any other prop guns? No. Do they find prop ammunition? No. Nothing. Literally nothing. You literally have zero proof except for the testimony of Lou and the testimony of 12E. And I've talked to you about why you should view their testimony with a healthy dose of skepticism. That's literally the only thing. There's no independent proof that that prop gun has ever existed. And equally insulting is this idea that there is like a cone of silence within the ASAP collective relating to members who knew that the defendant always carried this prop gun, which they only speak about, only ASAP 12 and only ASAP Blue, they only speak about this on the eve of trial. And that they're going to hold this information inside them, knowing that the defendant, their brother, is facing criminal charges. They're going to hold this inside, and they're only going to really present it to the 12 jurors. Does that make any sense to you? As soon as the defendant's arrested, what would you expect them to do? You'd expect them to be beating down the doors of the police station to tell the police officers and detectives, you guys got it all wrong. This is a fake gun. That's not what they do though. They hold it inside. They let him have criminal charges hang over his head. They let the preliminary hearing come and go. They literally wait till the day before jury selection to finally reveal that there was the gun that was used was a prop gun. It's, again, defies all reason. They claim, 12 and Lou, they both claim that the police never tried to talk to them. It's not true. You heard that they both refused to talk to the police when asked. That the judge specifically asked both of them, will you sit and talk to the police? They both refused. But even more, that's not really the expectation you would have, right? They had this information that would exonerate their friend, their brother, their meal ticket, the guy they rely on. You'd want them to seek out the police. At least that's what you'd expect. Not wait for the police to come knocking on their door, knowing that they have this secret information. Ladies and gentlemen, when you decide that the gun in this case was a real gun, for any one of the many reasons that I've given you, this case is over. Let me address really quickly, though, the new defense. It goes something like this. If you don't believe this was a prop gun, try to believe that when the defendant fired his real gun, he was only doing it either in defense of Hills or in defense of 12. Now, right off the bat, you have to acknowledge that that defense is completely contradictory, completely incompatible with the other defense, which is, no, actually, this was a prop. It cannot be both a prop gun and a real gun. The problem with that defense is very similar to everything else I've talked to, which is this whole case is on video. What the video in this case shows you is that Mr. Efron was not a violent person in either of these incidents. And especially at the corner of Vista Del Mar and Selma, when you can see that initial interaction, you can see that he's feet away from Hills as the defendant charges towards him with a gun. The defendant was not protecting anyone. He was not doing anything but initiating an attack, which he legally cannot do and then claim self-defense. I want to finish my argument with you by telling you a story. The story I'm going to tell you is the story of the defense in this case. If what they're telling you or want you to believe is true, this is essentially what would have to happen. Now, Rocky, he's a famous rapper. He's in his house and he's just hanging out with his good friend Lou. Lou would do anything for him. They meet in a crowd. Lou becomes his personal assistant, his tour manager. He's a DJ. He has his own clothing brand. He's a security consultant. Lou does it all. You need to know that even if you need someone to be at your house while the police are searching it, Lou's got your back. You need someone to come to court, lie on your behalf, provide a false alibi, Lou will do that for you too. Lou is Rocky's right-hand man. Now Rocky's having security problems. He's constantly being victimized by scary people. He's in a nightclub, he's stabbed with a real knife. It was violent, scary. Not only was he stabbed, but his good friend Twelvey was also stabbed at the same time. That's the kind of violence that he's faced. Not only that, scary people break into his house. He's had his home burglarized. He's had stalkers follow him. On top of all that, which has happened to him directly, that violence that Rocky's experiencing doesn't happen in a vacuum. Other rappers around him are also the victims of violent crimes, some even being shot and murdered with real guns. So faced with this violent world, these violent people, Rocky does the only reasonable thing he can think of. Does he hire extra security? No. He turns to Lou. And Lou, his security consultant, and a professional security person who will remain unidentified, jointly came to another reasonable conclusion, which is that when someone needs to defend themselves against real guns, real knives, like Rocky does, what they should do is they should carry a fake gun. Lucky for Rocky, he just so happens to film a music video, and on that music video set, he just so happened to have such a prop gun. Does he have to go out and buy a prop gun? No. That would have created a paper trail that could have proved that he had this prop gun. Instead, what Rocky does, he uses his ability to see in the future, where he sees that he's going to need this prop gun. And so he takes one of the prop guns from the music video shoot just in case. This is going to be very handy when his good friend Lou suggests to him that he should carry the prop gun to defend himself against, again, scary people with real weapons, real knives, real guns. Lou, you gotta understand too, in this story, Lou also loves guns. He owns a bunch of guns, he loves to shoot them, and he's very knowledgeable about guns. Specifically though, Lou owns a Glock 42, which uses .380 ammunition. Very important, you gotta understand this for the story. Neither Lou nor Rocky own a Glock 43. That has to be true in order for their story to make sense. Because a Glock 43 uses 9mm ammunition. But back to Lou, the other thing that you need to know about Lou is he's also apparently very clumsy. He's not detail oriented. And when Lou goes to the gun store one day, he just so happens to purchase an extra magazine, and wouldn't you know it, golly. Even though he owns the Glock 42, he just so happens to grab the wrong magazine. And he accidentally buys a Glock 43 magazine. Now remember, totally wrong magazine, will not fit in any of his guns, totally different caliber, totally useless to it. And around the same time, Lou and Rocky decide they're gonna go to a shooting range. And Lou comes over to Rocky's house, and he brings his guns and his new single useless magazine he's just bought for the completely wrong gun. And only then does Lou realize his mistake. While he's in Rocky's house, of course. Even worse, Lou calls around trying to find a gun range that they can go to, but he can't find one. So they don't go shooting. Now he has his guns, that's why he has his guns at Rocky's house, but that's why they don't go shooting. So what do they do instead? They're going to hang out, they're going to drink alcohol, and they're going to talk. Lou's not only clumsy though, Lou is also fidgety. That's his word, fidgety. And instead of fidgeting with literally anything else in the house, maybe the label on beer, literally anything else, what Lou's going to fidget with is that magazine that he bought for the wrong gun. And Lou's fidgeting is basically going to consist of him loading that magazine, that completely useless magazine, with his real ammunition. The ammunition, by the way, is difficult to purchase, regulated, but Lou doesn't care. Lou fidgets and also apparently stops fidgeting when the magazine's fully loaded. Doesn't unload his 9mm ammunition. For some reason, keeps it in this useless magazine. And Lou, because he's responsible, is going to leave it at Rocky's house. By the way, the first time Lou's going to mention that he's fidgeting and he has to do that is when he's on cross-examination at trial, and the fact that his useless magazine was fully loaded, he's pointed out to him. Convenient detail. Anyway, because Lou's been drinking, he leaves his guns, he leaves his magazine, including that useless one at Rocky's house overnight. He comes back the next day and he collects most of his stuff. What Lou doesn't collect, though, of course, that useless, fully loaded magazine. You also have to understand that even though I told you in this story, Rocky, he's been told, carry a fake gun, he doesn't really follow that advice when it comes to his house. And even though he's told he should carry a fake gun, he's gonna disregard that advice and he's gonna have real guns in his house, including chrome 44 Magnum Desert Eagle handgun. He's gonna have a rifle, he's gonna have a shotgun. But importantly, none of those guns use 9mm Luger ammunition. And Rocky keeps those real guns right next to his bed. Somehow, and Lou doesn't really explain this, after Lou leaves this Glock 43 magazine at Rocky's house, the magazine miraculously is going to end up not just in Rocky's bedroom, but in his bedroom closet. And it's going to be in a box with a bunch of stuff that actually fits the guns that Rocky has: rifle ammunition, shotgun ammunition. And again, it's just a total coincidence. Lou's useless magazine is going to end up, the one he's been fidgeting with is going to end up in Rocky's bedroom closet. Now, at this point, this is where I need to introduce yet another character to the story. This character, he's a cartoonesque villain. He's hulking, hugely muscular. He spends most of his time in the gym, except for when he's using his cartoon villain powers of seeing into the future and mind control. What do I mean by that? Well, this figure, I'm going to call him Relly, is going to set up Rocky to make it look like Rocky shot at him with a real gun, when everyone, including Relly, knows Rocky only carries fake guns. So how does he do this? Well, he's going to go to a shooting range, Relly. A few weeks before, he's going to set up Rocky. And he's going to fire guns, and of course, because he can see into the future, and he's going to set up Rocky, he's going to shoot a Glock 43 handgun and just collect those cartridges. Now, because Relly is such a mastermind, even though he's planning on setting up Rocky, he's going to film himself while he does this, for whatever reason he wants to have proof, I guess, of his master plan. While he's at the gun range, he's going to use his power to see into the future and see that Lou has bought the wrong magazine for a gun he doesn't own, and that Lou is going to leave the magazine at Rocky's house, and it's going to end up in Rocky's bedroom closet. And with that knowledge, Relly is going to intentionally fire that Glock 43, collect those cartridge cases, and carry them around just in case he happens to be in a place where Rocky shoots at him with his fake gun later. Relly's going to fly from LA to New York, North Carolina, back, repeatedly taking commercial flights. And somehow he's going to keep a hold on those fired cartridge cases that he's going to use to frame Rocky. Now here's where the mind control comes in. Relly somehow gets Rocky to provoke a confrontation. It's Relly's idea, but Rocky's going to do it. And he's going to make Rocky reach out to him with threatening messages and propose that Relly meet him when it's actually Relly's plan all along, right? It's brilliant. So Relly meets up with Rocky in Hollywood, and Relly gets Rocky to pull the gun on him as he's attacking Rocky. Now I say attacking Rocky, but what I really mean is that Relly's using his non-dominant left hand and casually reaching out towards Rocky. This, of course, is going to make Rocky respond. But what does Rocky do? Well, nothing, actually. This is where I have to introduce our next character, 12 to the story. And 12 is going to have the good fortune to be able to see and explain that Rocky didn't pull the fake gun as Relly had planned. What happened was the fake gun just so happened to fall out of Rocky's pants. What terrible luck for Rocky that it would fall out at that precise moment. And not only that, but fall into his hand, and then his finger would land near the trigger just at the moment where he happens to walk into view of a camera. Even more unfortunate, because in this story, Rocky isn't mad. He's not upset with Relly. You know, remember 12 he told you, oh, these were casual messages. Why are you ducking my calls? Let's get to it, you know? Very friendly. Rocky's not mad. But Rocky's gonna look mad on this video for some reason. It's gonna look like he's advancing towards Relly, when in reality, as 12 will tell you, it's just that he didn't have anywhere to go. I mean, apparently, except for the exact same direction that he came in when he walked into the frame booth. But Relly's not going to be successful in his plan just yet. Even though Rocky has the gun in his hand, Rocky's going to walk away. And since he hasn't satisfied his objective, Relly's going to follow Rocky and the other members, and he's going to call them a bunch of bad names. Relly's seen the future, so he knows that Rocky's going to attack. But Relly's going to attack Ills first, and Relly's going to throw haymakers and punches at Ills, repeatedly punching him in the face. Now, shockingly, despite Relly's tremendous size and strength, Ills will suffer no injuries. This is where Relly's plan runs into some really good fortune, because even though Relly knows that the gun is fake, Relly's going to start acting like Rocky's using a real gun. And as is Relly's just fantastic fortune, Rocky and 12E are, also for unknown reasons, also going to act like Rocky is firing a real gun. Rocky's going to chase Relly, which he doesn't have to do because the gun that he's using is fake and doesn't fire anything. 12E too, he knows it's fake, but 12E's also going to run away across the street and hide behind a wall. Really though, he's just playing along because he actually knows the gun's fake. Relly's fortune's getting even better because there will just so happen to be a camera that captures all of this brilliant acting by Relly, Rocky, and 12E. Okay? As is Relly's plan now, he's been successful. Rocky's fired that gun at him twice. He knows he's got those cartridge cases to frame him. So after everyone leaves, what does Relly do? Of course. Does he plant those fake cartridge cases that he's been carrying around to frame Rocky? And then stay there, point them out to the police. Hey, look, you guys find these. No. He's just going to leave. And he's going to wait for the police to search, not find anything, and then he's going to come back. He's going to plant them for reasons that are unexplained, because he's then also going to pick them up again, and he's going to walk them into the police station himself. And then when he reports this to the police, he's going to tell the police that Rocky fired 2 gunshots at him so that his story matches the evidence found, right? That's what he's going to do? No. Actually, what he's going to do, this is brilliant, he's going to tell the police that it was 3 or 4 gunshots. And in fact, he's going to repeat that over and over and over and over again. Why? Again, Relly's got that power. He knows, he can see into the future. He knows that there's going to be video that captures the sound of only 2 gunshots. And Relly also knows that when the police search Rocky's house, they're going to find Lou's magazine for that Glock 43, which will miraculously be consistent with the fired cartridge cases that Relly planted, but which it's all miraculous because Relly was, using his future-seeing power. Now, Relly's going to make a mistake. That night, he's going to accuse Rocky of firing a real gun at him. Specifically, he's going to accuse Rocky directly, and he's going to tell Rocky's manager, and he's going to tell other people that were with Rocky, who all know that the gun is fake, via text message that Rocky actually fired a real gun. Now, even though Rocky knows that Relly is going to say that he used a real gun, even though he knows he actually fired a fake gun for some unknown, still unexplained reason, Rocky is going to tell his good friend Lou that he needs to get rid of the fake gun. That fake gun is Rocky's best proof that he didn't shoot at Relly with a real gun. But for some reason, Rocky tells Lou to get rid of it, and Lou does. How does Lou do that? He flies back to New York on a private jet, and he just gives it back to the co-director of the music video where Rocky got it after the shooting. Now the police are going to get involved, and the police are going to arrest Rocky for shooting a real gun at that mind-controlling, super muscular Relly. And all that Lou has to do is go back to the co-director of the music video and ask him for the gun back. But unfortunately for Rocky, that gun's been misplaced. And Lou isn't going to follow up at all. He's to decide one call's enough, that's it. Even though Lou and 12B love Rocky like they're brothers, for some reason, they're going to decide not to tell the police that Rocky's innocent. They're going to wait until Rocky goes to trial, and then at the very last minute, they're going to tell the jurors that it was a fake gun. Because obviously that's the rational thing to do. Wait for your brother to have charges hanging over his head. Wait for your brother to go to trial and spring it on the last minute. Ladies and gentlemen, if that story sounded like it was not just unreasonable, but literally impossible, that is the defense story in this case. When I started, I told you that there's one key issue we need to decide. Was it a prop gun or a real gun? The overwhelming evidence in this case was that it was a real gun. Here's why. The defendant provoked that conversation with Mr. Efron via text message and phone calls. He was clearly upset with Mr. Efron prior to that meeting. When they met, the defendant was clearly angry. He pulls a gun, which Mr. Efron and Ills immediately respond to by backing away. That's consistent with a real gun, inconsistent with everyone believing this is a fake gun. When they reach the corner of Vista Del Mar and Selma, the defendant pulls that gun for a second time. Immediately, he's making aggressive moves with the gun. He's making actions towards Mr. Efron. That's consistent with a real gun, inconsistent with a fake gun. Mr. Efron immediately dives behind Ills, uses him as a human shield, while the defendant's making active, furtive movements, trying to get a line of sight around Ills. That's only consistent with a real gun and inconsistent, completely inconsistent with this gun being fake. The defendant fires off 2 rounds, or loud, they set off car alarms. 12 retreats behind a wall. That's only consistent with a real firearm, completely inconsistent with a fake gun. After the shooting, the defendant gets rid of the gun. That's undisputed. That's completely inconsistent with that gun being fake. The defendant still has that Glock 43 magazine in his bedroom closet. On top of ammunition for the other real guns that he owns. Again, that magazine, consistent with the type of firearm that fired those 2 cartridge cases that are found at the scene. Those real cartridge cases, that real ammunition. That gun, the Glock 43, only fires 9mm. None of the other guns in the defendant's house fire 9mm. He has nothing else in his possession that that magazine would go to. It's completely consistent with him getting rid of the Glock 43 after the shooting, because that's the real gun that was used in this case. Clear, definitive proof the defendant fired a real gun that night. The last point I'll leave you with, on the other side, there's literally no evidence of a prop gun. No evidence that it ever existed. The actual prop gun has never been produced. Definitely not to you. There's no prop ammunition found in his house. The rationale, this whole security thing for carrying a prop gun, defies common sense, defies logic, totally unreasonable. The rationale for pulling that prop gun on a man who knows it's a prop gun. Completely unreasonable. There's no prop ammunition found at the scene. There's literally not one piece of paper, not one shred of documentation that could prove to you the existence of this gun. And again, all the actions of the people that you see on that video, completely consistent with a real gun being fired, completely inconsistent with this being a prop. So left with that, clear evidence that the defendant used a real gun, and a complete lack of evidence that he used a prop gun. Your job, as I started in my opening statement, as I started here, is simple. Simple. The evidence compels you to your decision, and it compels you to find him guilty. That is the only just verdict in this case. Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take the break now, but it's going to be shorter than usual. 1:15, please be outside the courtroom doors at 1:15, at which time we will resume. Again, please don't step.